Continuing my series where I walk through all the fragrances from the house of Frederic Malle, today's topic is collaborations. I really like the way that Frederic approached collaboration. It seemed like it was an authentic expression of friendship and mutual respect with another creative. Unfortunately, there aren't that many in that series, and a few of them are discontinued. And now that Frederic has left, we'll see if this continues, if they ever get a new creative director taking the helm. So we're going to start off with probably my most precious little sample here, which is Dries Van Noten by Frederic Malle. If you know Dries, the designer's style, it's very eclectic. There's often lots of colors and embroidery and pattern. He's part of the Antwerp Six, which was a group of designers that came up around the same time from Antwerp that include names like Margiela, Walter van Beirendonck, and Dummelmeester. It was kind of a wave of cutting edge and creative fashion. Dries was very well respected as just sort of a solid designer that season after season delivered. He unfortunately a few years ago sold his house or a large stake to a larger conglomerate, and just about a year ago he left his namesake brand. Unfortunately, with the sale of his house came Dries Van Noten line of fragrances, and the collaboration with Frederic Malle had to be discontinued. I've said it before and I'll say it again that I would trade the entire Dries Van Noten line of fragrances just to have this one back any day of the week, as those ended up being quite disappointing and sort of disappointed me in that I thought Dries had maybe more integrity himself to not let this kind of become of his brand. He was independent for so many years, and then like so many other kind of things we get cynical about with fashion design and fragrance, he sold his company. They launched a beauty and fragrance line. It wasn't very well done. It didn't really have the heart and authenticity that the brand was known for, and then he exited the brand. It's just unfortunate the way this plays out over and over again. So I don't have a bottle. It's also one of my few fragrance regrets. In general, I try to fight FOMO, especially with the rate of release and discontinuation. You just can't keep up with everything. And even if we missed out on some things that we wanted, I'm sure that we all have more than enough fragrances that are in production to buy and wear. But this one, I knew it was being discontinued, and I hemmed and hawed because at the time, I wasn't sure how much I liked it, and I didn't like the idea of buying something just because it was being discontinued. Of course, once it was gone, I regretted not grabbing a bottle. I was watching it on a few websites, waiting. It was still available. And then one day, just like poof, it totally dried up. A few months later, or I'm not sure how much later, but I remember that it was kind of the beginning of the pandemic, and Frederic Malle was overhauling their website, as were many fragrance brands, increasing their online availability. And they had an offer to buy something and get these 3.5 ml samples, which used to be the standard free sample from Frederic Malle. And I noticed that Dries Van Noten was among them. This is long after it's discontinued. So I bought something just so I could have a little bit on hand. I've not worn this in a long time, but here we go. I'll spray it and make it my scent of the day. Maybe it'll be a tradition to wear this once or twice per year. So what is this about? Milky sandalwood. It references Dries' Belgian connection with cookies. I think, what are they called? Well, let's see here. So I pulled up some of the notes on this. It's hard to find these now because it's off the Frederic Malle website. So I referenced, I'll give credit where credit is due, Now Smell This, which often has press releases on their blog. So what's interesting is it says, first of all, it took 18 months for Malle to translate the Van Noten universe into scent with Bruno Jovanovic. First of all, what I'm getting right now, interestingly, reminds me a little bit of Monsieur. If Monsieur's patchouli was replaced with sandalwood, that kind of boozy opening, which I don't remember, with sort of a creamy, nutty, milky sandalwood. I think what disturbed me about this back in the day when I tried it was the gourmand nature. It really does smell a bit like milk and cookies, and I wasn't quite sure I wanted to smell like that. Yeah, but it's really lovely right now. So let's read this little blurb. This is Frederic speaking about Bruno. He says, then I tried to make Bruno understand the essence of the Dries world. I spoke about the different themes and recurrent materials, Indian embroideries, engravings, graphic and colorful prints. So what I said already. The result is a modern oriental based on sandalwood. Violet wood, vanilla. Actually, that's interesting. I do get the violet in the beginning now that I see it. It has a little bit of that violet candy powderiness bringing up, giving a little bit of freshness. But yeah, it's really lovely. I do wish I had a bottle. Other notes include sandalwood, vanilla, tonka, patchouli, gaiac. Yeah, patchouli. By no means would I say Monsieur is a replacement for this. It's very different, but interesting that I'm smelling some connections. Maybe the patchouli used and the sort of rummy note at the beginning. But yeah, if you imagine milk and cookies, gingerbread, it's a very holiday type vibe, but it's very interesting. I've tried to think of other fragrances that might do a similar thing. There are no direct replacements. I think it's actually a very unique fragrance, and that's one of its strong points. But I do think Chanel Bois des Îles kind of scratches the same itch while smelling quite different. So I've got a spray here just to do a little side by side. Immediately, Bois des Îles is more vintage smelling, more fresh up top. With those aldehydes, you really smell those Chanel aldehydes at top. But I do believe if you're seeking a creamy gingerbready sandalwood, give Bois des Îles a try. They don't smell the same, but to me, there's also this sort of gingerbread cookie smell in the dry down of Bois des Îles that I think, scratches a similar itch to Dries Van Noten while not smelling it. Dries, in comparison, as it dries down, I almost get the tiniest hint of something animalic. It may actually be, sometimes I get this from tonka, but it also says clove, the spices, like just the slightest hint of something slightly sweaty or bodily. And I see why I didn't necessarily love it back then. I appreciate it a lot more now because there's something a little bit challenging about that mixture of milky, sandalwood, gourmand, spicy, animalic. It's like borderline doesn't work, but I feel like it's calibrated just so in a way that it does. The vanilla has a real kind of thick custardy sensation to it. So really lovely perfume. We've heard for years now rumors that it will come back and this still hasn't materialized. So my hopes are pretty low for that happening, but it would be nice if it did. We can almost guarantee, as old as it is, that it probably wouldn't smell exactly the same, but I would be happy if it came back and at least smelled pretty similar to the old version. I personally wouldn't go out of my way to spend a ton of money on a bottle unless you've smelled it before and you really like it. It's interesting. I don't think it's mind-blowing. I think it's extremely unique and it's really well done, and it's a nice milky cookie sandalwood. I've smelled other milky sandalwoods that don't ever do quite the same thing with that sort of cookie note here. So moving on to the most recent, we have Acne Studios. You might say this is, for the cynics among us, the beginning of the end for Frederic Malle. Although they did talk about a true connection with the designer, the kind of young, trendy nature of Acne Studios just doesn't seem like it's on the same level as a Dries Van Noten. It seems more like a commercial-minded move to tap into a younger audience and get a younger audience interested in the brand of Frederic Malle, which is understandable. After all, this is a business. I do think fragrance is an art, but the art of fragrance, just like the art world itself, relies on business to keep going. But I will say, after reviewing this and giving a fairly positive review, I occasionally question my first impressions and wonder, was I too quick to be positive or negative about something? But I'll say about 99% of the time when I revisit, I always come back to the same conclusion. So I do have the same conclusion. That's actually quite nice. I think for what it is, it's very well done for this sort of clean, starchy laundry powder. To me, the saving grace is the violet. The violet note here keeps it a little more interesting. It gives this kind of dusty powderiness to it that keeps it out of just the most generic, clean, white musk smells. I'd say it's less generic than, say, an MFK laundry type smell like Aqua Universalis. It's less generic than like a Musk Ultra Blanc from Guerlain to me. Now, apparently this seems to have a very divisive, I suppose, molecule or something in it, because some people have reacted very violently towards this, thinking it's incredibly strong and screechy, and I don't get that at all. It's long-lasting-ish, but I also find that it goes quite soft on the skin after a while, and I don't get anything aggressive at all in this perfume. Quite nice, really, yeah, violet candy with sort of detergent. To me, what's so interesting is the texture. They really do capture the brief, which was to capture that fuzziness of the iconic sort of mohair scarf of Acne Studios. And I also really get the sense of pastel colors in a fuzzy texture. So while very overpriced, and that's always a matter, especially with Frederic Malle these days, I think it's well done, and I don't think it's necessarily just a throwaway cash grab. It's just an attempt to maybe refresh the brand and get a new audience interested in what the brand is doing. So moving on to another maybe throwaway, I'm including here Outrageous, which isn't a true designer collaboration, but it was a boutique collaboration. For those who remember, Barney's in New York was often a real breeding ground for like new and noteworthy designers, and that included fragrance. I can remember my first encounter with Frederic Malle when it was a brand new brand, and the sales associate were really pushing this new brand, and I wasn't interested, and I regret, because of course those must have been the matte caps back then. So Barney's was the place to go to smell Frederic Malle, to see kind of the latest and greatest fashion, and it's a real disappointment that the department store went out of business. But Outrageous began as a collaboration with Barney's Co-op, and Barney's Co-op was sort of the more accessible younger brother of Barney's boutiques. It carried more like jeans, jean brands, more like sportswear brands. And I think they had more locations than main Barney's boutiques. And so Outrageous, likewise, was a cheaper Frederic Malle that was available originally only at Barney's Co-op. And it's probably the cheapest smelling Frederic Malle fragrance, period. It's kind of a nice citrusy fragrance with an ambroxan base. Again, it is well done. It's by Sophia Grossman. They say A Night in Rio. Interesting. The electrifying momentum of Brazilian dance, the feeling of freedom on the beach, and it lists neroli, bergamot, apple, orange blossom, white musk. I have to say, I think it's the apple which is reading as cheap to me. It does have this sort of fruity, it does have a fun, beachy character to it. I think for a very good price, like $100, it could be a fun summer spritz. Certainly not worth the retail. Again, I think that's an interesting topic in itself, what's worth a high price. I do think if you love it, it's more that you love it and you'll wear it a lot is more important when it comes to price. But I think a high price sets certain expectations in terms of uniqueness maybe, and this isn't all that unique. But yeah, I don't hate it, but I wouldn't spend big bucks for it. On to the final one, and this is a bit of an emotional one. Superstitious was the collaboration with Alber Elbaz. For those who don't know, Alber really came to fame as the head designer for Lanvin. He was very well respected for really kind of reinvigorating the brand as a whole. He was sort of unceremoniously fired due to clashes with apparently a nasty CEO. I don't know too much about it, so I don't want to slander her, but if you read the history, it's a bit funny. And you could tell that Alber and Frederic are really of a similar generation, and they really got each other. And watching the promotional videos for this were really moving, just to see two kind of creative equals having fun, creating something together. So let's see. I'll read a little bit of blurb about this. Alber saying, the perfume of a dress, the silhouette that lingers after a woman has left the room. And then the fragrance lasts quite a while. Some references might be Chanel No. 5, these classic aldehydic jasmine floral fragrances. So I was very lucky to pick up a bottle of this because I thought it had been discontinued, and it had been discontinued when a single bottle popped up on a retailer. It seems to be maybe they just found some extra stock, and I grabbed it. Before that, I did have the travel size already, and that's what I've sprayed right now. Yeah, this is just so fun. It's not aldehydic in that really fizzy way that Chanel aldehydes are, but it's aldehydic in this like soap bubbles kind of way. Actually, smelling it next to Acne Studios, this is like a much better Acne Studios in that it has this sort of soapy, almost laundry fresh thing, but it's much more interesting. To me, it has such a shiny surface, almost like this shiny black. I've described before that I feel like this is like Chanel No. 5 from the year 3000. There's something very futuristic about it to me. The jasmine feels alien, like a jasmine from another planet that's like semi-recognizable as what we have here on Earth, but has different properties. It's very strong, it's very beautiful. There's a hint of kind of a dry incense in the background. This one is probably my favorite of the lot of these. I really enjoy wearing it. I'm super happy to have a bottle. It's a bit emotional because unfortunately Alber has passed away, and I wish they would also bring this back maybe in memoriam to keep part of Alber's personality and his creativity alive in fragrance form. I remember very strongly, even though I wasn't a big fan, particularly of Lanvin, just because what he's known for is women's wear, and I tend to be more interested selfishly just in what's going on in the menswear world. He seemed like a really nice guy and very talented, of course. And I remember listening to a long podcast with Alber while walking on the beach during kind of, again, pandemic memories, kind of a peaceful stroll on the beach. And Alber was talking about his excitement of being back in fashion, working with young people. He was launching a new brand called A to Z Factory, which I think the concept was something more affordable and for every woman. And shortly after that, he passed away. And there's two themes that I think really make me emotional, and they both involve aging. The first is the theme, emotional in a positive way, of older creatives having a new birth. We see it many times in music and art where people reach a certain old age and they just have a new creative turn. They do something brand new. I think too often as people age, they get stuck in their ways and just kind of peter out and become more conservative. So I always find it really inspiring when older people actually open up and get more liberal. So we have John Cage's liberal, not politically, liberal in terms of their thought and open-mindedness. John Cage's late works, the number works, are extremely interesting. Beethoven's late piano sonatas are really crazy and unhinged and modern sounding. There's the paper cuts of Matisse, which are available at the MoMA to see. And some of these come from, I believe, Matisse could no longer paint, so he went into paper cutting. So I'm just extremely inspired. Sorry for this side rant. When I see creatives having a totally brand new creative inspiration late in life. And on the flip side of what's really devastatingly sad is hearing from someone who's excited about this new chapter opening and then passes away. So I felt really affected by the passing of Alber, even though of course I don't know him, and I always think of him when I wear this fragrance. And I think of those press release videos. Worth giving a watch. So yeah, I'm pulling out more of the incense. I don't know what it is that makes it so modern. I think there's a vetiver in the base here, which feels like the very kind of polished, scrubbed, clean vetiver that was also used in Vetiver Extraordinaire. So let's see if I can find any more interesting blurbs about this. Yeah, I quite like this little quote. It says, "The one thing I was asking Frederic, the only request I had, is to not have a perfume with a scent of chocolate or vanilla. Whatever, that is very à la mode at the moment, you know? That's all about gourmandise, they call it." This is Alber speaking. Like we can't eat food, it's forbidden, so let's make the perfume smell like chocolate. If you want a chocolate, go buy a chocolate. Don't perfume yourself with chocolate. So that's quite funny, and especially because Dries is very much a gourmand. Some people have described this as like the scent of couture, and I can agree with that. I've also seen in the comments of my previous videos that this one is back, but I still have yet to see evidence of this. Maybe in France, who knows? Never seen a bottle at a boutique, never seen a bottle online or their official website. So I'm not sure about that. So let's do a last sniff through, everybody. Again, Dries is on my arm. Yeah, I think it's the dry down. I think the opening I really love. It's the dry down that gets a little bit weird in terms that mix. The milkiness is like almost stomach churning. If I had scored a full bottle, I'm not sure how much I would wear it. Maybe this 3.5 is enough. That's a good thing about having something on hand at least. So whenever you're feeling FOMO, you can spray it again and realize, oh wait, maybe there's a reason I didn't buy it back then. It is still nice and interesting, but that dry down, yeah, it kind of gives me flashbacks to what I was thinking when I didn't buy it. Comparison, Bois des Îles. Yeah, clearly a completely different fragrance, but if you want a smooth, slightly gingerbready, the main difference I'm getting right now is just those aldehydes are still going, those Chanel aldehydes, and that vintage smell is still there. Acne Studios, yeah, it's still quite strong right now. Again, my experience is that it's quite strong and very like effusive for a couple hours, but then after that it kind of takes a sharp dive into a skin scent that will last the rest of the day. There is something that really does remind me of the powderiness of laundry detergent. The way that, like, you know, that white crystalline thing, like if you shake it up, you get like a dust in the air. But yeah, there's a very strong, clear, almost like a clear bell ringing violet that I think really keeps it from being mundane. And I appreciate that about it. So this would be outrageous. Yeah, man, kind of lemony. You get a little bit of that like warm ambroxany trail. Yeah, not the best. And then of course, Superstitious. Yeah, it's just so good. You have to be careful with the sprays. It almost feels like an X-ray, but it's so like just one smell. You can tell that it's like has many constituent components, but it's so blended. That's why I always get this image of just this like glass orb that's just like one big shiny thing. I think I've said this before, sorry for being like a snob, but well, it's not that snobby. Jeff Koons is very like popular artist, but I instantly see a Jeff Koons balloon when I smell Superstitious. I'm not sure I'm the only one. I really love that. I love that they took a potentially vintage idea and made it not just modern, but in my mind, futuristic. So those are my thoughts on the collaborations that Frederic Malle has done. Very curious to see what will become of the brand now. I think the worst case scenario is that it stays headless. I think it really needs a creator's vision and hopefully someone as elegant and smart and knowledgeable as Frederic, but that's a huge ask. But I think we need somebody at the helm who has a similar connection to the art of perfume, and with perfumers, a similar kind of friendship where perfumers can feel free to work openly and pursue the ideas that they've had that maybe haven't been published by other companies. But we shall see. At least he leaves us with a legacy of a ton of fantastic perfumes.